It's time for Tab Talks, your weekly conversation about matters of faith. I'm your host, Jennifer Rash.
And I'm your co host, Debbie Campbell.
We are going to talk about BethanyKids. It's an amazing service and ministry out of Africa. And we have with us Peter Lublink, and he is the executive director of BethanyKids, and David Nyanga, director of the Kenya chapter, I guess, for BethanyKids. Welcome, Peter and David. Thanks for coming.
Thank you. So good to be here.
All right, all right. Well, we want to know what this is. I mean, Debbie and I both, all of us here at Tab Media, we have a heart for kids for sure, and we love when we can help in so many different ways. But tell us a little bit about, because I understand this is a Christian mission organization, and then it's a compassion ministry, and then it helps children with some of the needs they have, mainly through surgical needs, I believe. So Peter, if you want to jump in and just give us the big picture, and then David, help us see
Sure.
how it's specifically happening there.
Yeah, absolutely. So big picture, we start by training local surgeons. So we have a training program in Kenya that trains pediatric surgeons from across Africa.
Okay.
So we train local surgeons, and then as those local surgeons return to their home countries, they really effectively serve as missionary surgeons, but in their home country. So there's no need for language courses or cultural kind of training. They serve in their home countries, but with this real heart for mission, this real Jesus-centered approach to surgery. So we provide surgeries. That's probably the biggest thing we do statistically. Our biggest investment is that we pay for children's surgeries. Any child who comes to any of these hospitals in which we work that cannot afford care, we'll pay for that. We also want to be people who provide holistic care. So in each of those countries, and as of this month, we're now in 7 countries. So 7 different surgeons doing work in 7 different communities. And what we're wanting to do is kind of build capacity around that surgeon with physiotherapists, chaplains, sort of a well-rounded team of people who really put children's needs first and carry with them through many years. And I know Kenya is where we started. So I think David can speak to what we're doing in Kenya, and it is really a great example of how it's gone from the surgical program to really a very holistic mission.
Okay, so David, do you want to pick up with the holistic mission part?
Yes, so it started out as a surgical program, like Peter said. So in 1997, around that time, some surgeon that was here, he's the founder of BethanyKids, he realized that there were many children who needed surgical care, and most of them, their lives could change drastically for the better with just a simple surgery. And so he went out, went to schools and other places, finding kids that he could help, and brought them back to where I am right now, which is a place called Kijabi. We overlook the Rift Valley, a very beautiful view. And so he'd bring them out here where there's a hospital called Kijabi Hospital, and he'd do surgery for them, pay for their surgery, and then take them back. And from there, he started seeing that the need was bigger and needed to form something around that would help take care of more kids. And that's how it's grown. But then more than the surgeries, he and colleagues that joined him later saw that there was a need to train surgeons. In our setting in Kenya and in many other countries in Africa, there are very few surgeons who are specialized in different care and especially care of children. So pediatric surgery is very rare. And so they ended up forming partnerships that accredited our program here. So our surgeons could train surgeons from different countries in Africa. And it ended up growing where we had surgeons going back to their countries, like Peter said, doing work there, and ended up with us even having surgeons now trained in this program, running this program here and training other surgeons. So it ended up being a beautiful thing. But more than that, in 2009, we started doing things outside the surgery. So we started with follow-up. We had started much earlier where we'd go closer to where the families were to see how they were doing after surgery instead of having them travel all the way to Kijabi. And in 2009, it went even more into rehabilitation. So we are working in a place where there are 300 children who need regular therapy, and our team does all the rehab care there. And 60% of the kids there use wheelchairs. And so from that, we saw a need to develop a program around pediatric assistive technology. So, and we formed a team around that and got them trained, and they offer assistive technology devices, mostly wheelchairs to begin with, through a WHO approved program. And it keeps growing and growing, and so it's just being part of it is just beautiful and wonderful.
As you mentioned, so many of the children, how do the families find out about BethanyKids if they have a child that needs surgery? How do y'all go about getting that word out?
So in the beginning, it started with us going out to look for them. But then as we went out to look for them, we formed partnership with the people that would host us. And so those people know about us. So through word of mouth, they are able to tell people that if they see a child, because most of them are either hospitals, community-based rehab programs, or churches. And through that community and those types of communities, they get to know a child is born somewhere with a different condition, and then they get to tell them. But then as we grew, we also started a small media department that brings out, we end up on radio stations sometimes, or make pamphlets that we can distribute. But then also the word has gone out to a degree where for many years we were known as the best place for neurosurgical care. And so even children born very far away from Kijabi, the midwife, the person delivering the baby would know if they saw a child with a condition that they could help, they would tell them, I think the best place for you to go is Kijabi. And so that's how it's growing even now.
Do you ever find that parents are is it hard to trust? Is it hard to let you take the child to have the surgery?
Yeah, very much so, because when what we see mostly with the parents is a sense of hopelessness and despair when they come to us, because uh, even when they're told that maybe Kijabi can help, there's also many other people who've told them that, oh, this is just crazy, we don't know what this is. And maybe even medical professionals who don't know that surgery can help have told them that your baby is better off just taking them home and letting them die, or such things. So hopeless situations. So when they come to us, what we see a lot of is despair, and what we try and give them is hope. After they see our surgeons and our surgeons feel that they can help them, we try and encourage them and create a very welcoming situation. But yes, it is very, and they all come with their kids. So they come with their kids, admitted into the ward with their kids, stay with their kids until they are discharged. So we try and walk with them throughout the journey, try and make, like Peter said, try and make finances not a big problem, because most of them are afraid of the care, because they can't afford it, and they're afraid of where they are. Some of them have never been to Kijabi. It's overlooking the Rift Valley, but it's in the middle of two main roads, in a road that people rarely take. So as you drive here for the first time, you feel like you're driving downhill towards a bottomless pit. So it's scary for people who've never been here. So a lot of them come with a lot of despair.
One of the things we've said before is for many of these families, this is one of the worst days in their life. And that it is in that moment that you get to serve them. And sometimes that's David. And there's also other staff members who are kind of on the front line of caring for these family members. And one of those staff members who shared his own story before with us, he actually was born with spina bifida, so he went through some of the same surgeries and programs that we now offer. And he's sitting very near the front. He does his work in one of the desks near the front. And he said many times that he feels like he gets to be a source of hope, because they can see here's a guy who is employed, who is happy in his profession, who is still using crutches, who is still very much, working through something like spina bifida, but he's kind of a few stages ahead. And so it's just very visual hope to see someone who's just like your child succeeding in their profession.
Yeah, I can see where, just those moments, the opportunity to share beyond just that physical, the surgery that's going to happen. And how does that play out then for the mission, the Christian mission aspect of all of this through the families?
Yeah, so we definitely, again, as we said earlier, we see our surgeons all as missionary surgeons who are really trying to model the love of Jesus in all things. So even how we set up the programs, we want to make sure it's very reflective of how Jesus loves us, this really unconditional, compassionate, transformative love. And the result is that there continues to be many conversations between our caregivers, whether they be nurses, staff members, surgeons, and families about Jesus. And many of those are kind of a first time conversation about Jesus. So the numbers escape me right now, but I think last year was something like 360 first time sort of conversions of people saying, wow, this Jesus is a story I've never heard before. This God that I didn't know, now I realize is real and tangible in some way. And in many ways, that's because they experienced the love of God through a person. And so when you want to communicate to someone that Jesus loves you, that God loves you, one of the best ways, of course, to do that is to reflect that love and to actually model it for them so that they can see this is real and this is measurable kind of love.
David, could you share with us maybe an experience or something that, to help us really visualize and see the care that's happening with these children and families?
Oh,
I know you have a lot.
I know. Well, maybe I'll start with just someone who works with us, Francisca, which is before Bethany Kids was really Bethany Kids, but it's really a picture of all the kids that come here. So for many years, she was ostracized in her community because she couldn't control her bladder. So she was always wet and stinky. And so she'd considered even suicide and all that. But when she came here, first, I think being in an environment that there is knowledge that something can be done brings hope, because I know she always says that she was surprised that when the doctor saw her, her problem was she couldn't use her legs, and she was wet, but the doctor asked to see her back, and so that surprised her, because why would he want to see? How does he know that there's something different about my back? And so that connection forming for her was, oh, so there's something different here. But then more than that, she got to know about the care that was going. So the doctor explained to her very well what was going to happen, and then took her through the whole process and introduced her to people who would be there while the care was going on. And she found people who shared the love of God, not just in words, but in action. And that's what even now kids find when they come here. So when they come in, usually they are seen by a nurse. And what we try is to make sure that they are directed where they're supposed to go. So it's important for them to know exactly where they're supposed to go. And once they are there, they get to be told about what Bethany Kids is about, what programs they are, and when they see that there are people who, first of all, know something about the condition that their child has, that gives them hope. But then more than that, if they see people who are willing to help beyond the financial, because most of them, what we try and tell them is, this is what it will cost for you to get surgery. And we ask them, what plan would you have to meet that cost? And then that starts the conversation. And there you'll hear many stories. I work as a casual worker in Nairobi. I earn 300 shillings a day, which is like $3 a day. And when you hear such things, you know they truly cannot afford this. So if they hear that, so you were going to book your child for surgery and all that, and you don't have to worry about the money, we'll take care of this, or we have this program that's going to ask you a few questions, and maybe if depending on what's available, they might help fund you. When they hear that, they just get a sense of, oh, this is beautiful, this is amazing. And some of them also, after the care, I think they appreciate that we follow them up even longer. So we keep calling, we keep sending people there to see them. So that's a big thing. And just one example, Francisca, but there are so many more, and so many people. I lead a team of 33, and they would probably tell better stories than than I would. And so I don't feel I'm representing them the right way. I wish they were all here to tell their stories.
So David, are you saying then that it's kind of a sliding scale as whether people can pay or not pay, and then all of that's worked out in the orientation part of the early
Yes, because
stages? Is that
yes, because Kenya, the way the healthcare system works, there's a growing national insurance program. It's called the National Health Insurance Fund, and over the years, it's grown better and better. And so, a few years back, I think 4 years ago, they started funding surgeries. So if someone is well informed about that program and through either their employment, because for someone who's employed, it's they make it statutory for you to pay into that fund. So if maybe they're formally employed, they'll be able to pay into that fund and so have access to those funds. So it's important to find out without judging the family once they come in. So you could see them in tatters, or maybe like we have a community called the Maasai. So in their Maasai traditional attire, you could assume they don't have money. But talking to them, you find first, not that they have money, or maybe they're employed or in a position to access the National Health Insurance Fund. So our social workers are taught to engage the family where they are at. So just ask them how you are, how are you doing. So we are glad you're here, and we think we can help your baby, and this is what it will cost to take care of your baby. Do you have any plan to meet such a cost? And then that conversation begins. And by God's grace, we formed partnerships with different organizations which help out for some part of the bill. But then on the most part, we end up paying a little of towards most of the surgeries and most of the families that come here. So
And if
because
I
even
can,
sorry.
oh, sorry to interrupt, David. I was just going to add, outside of Kenya, of course, every country has its own kind of rules around these. What David has been walking you through, where Kenya has a national health insurance plan. So every one of the countries in which we work is going to have a slightly different arrangement there.
Okay.
And what we find is there are always people who fall through the cracks. There's always people who, for one reason, as David mentioned, maybe they're casual laborer who don't have formal employment. There's always people who can't afford care. And so there's that, as you well put it well, that this kind of sliding scale. If you can afford it, you pay for it, great. If you can't afford it, we will cover it. So across the 7 different countries, in most cases, that's what we're doing. We're paying for a significant part of the surgery. Where we've most recently started in the country of Zambia, the country's their national insurance really does cover all the surgeries, and so there's a solid plan in place to cover surgeries. But where it falls short is that the government does not pay for any kind of testing, so diagnostic testing, blood work, X-rays, etc. So even though it's a good program in terms of helping kids access surgery, there's still this barrier that exists to care. And so our goal is always to try to give the best care to children. And so in the case of Zambia, what we're doing is we're beginning by paying for any of the children who need X-rays, blood work, etc. So we can remove that barrier, and then they can access the surgeries. So every country is kind of going to have its nuances, and it's going to have slight variations. But in every case, our commitment is to try to make sure children get access to quality care. So that they can get back to the playground, they can go back to school, they can go back to living their lives. And David, as he talked about Francesca and the team at Joytown School, that were these 300 plus children at the school, and you can see them just playing and smiling and enjoying life on the playground. Many of them in our wheelchairs or benefiting from the physiotherapy. And that is always our goal, to see kids get back to the life that they want to lead, so that they can grow up and become movers and shakers in their communities. People like Francesca, people like Billy, who have come through some of these congenital challenges, but have come through the other side and now are leaders in their community, are giving back in beautiful, beautiful ways.
So they are in many ways, the patients are becoming the best advocates for.
Yeah, right. And in the case of Francesca that David was mentioning, so her role, David mentioned that one of her struggles growing up is that she didn't have bladder control. So she was always wet. And that for her brought her shame and a sense of depression and anxiety and even suicidal thoughts. And now the program that she leads is a continence management program. That is, she helps kids who have bladder issues. She helps those children with the same kinds of challenges she faced, helps them work through it. And so she's not just coming in as sort of an expert in a strategy or a medical program, but she's a very real human being in front of them who can tell her own story and help them through it. So the best coaches have been great players, and she is someone who has experienced it firsthand and now is able to give back to her community in a very specific way that's related to her own condition.
Well, Peter, Peter and David both, one thing we've been talking about BethanyKids and what you all do, but I think I have an interest in knowing how you both connected and became a part of BethanyKids. So I guess, Peter, we could start with you just to find out.
Sure. So I'm more recent to BethanyKids. I started with BethanyKids about a year ago. And before that, I had become familiar with it because of some of the work that they were doing around, in Kenya specifically, the photography. I had seen some of their work. Over the last 3 years, started to see what they're up to. And really, when I saw that there was an opening, it was like just absolutely my dream job to join them and help in whatever way that I could. So I had been living in the Middle East the last 8 years, serving, among other things, as a pastor, working for a communications company. So knowing that I could take all of that skill, the pastoral work, the administration, and bring it to this cause, which really does transform lives on a daily basis, just filled me with joy. So that's how I came into BethanyKids.
How about you, David?
Well, after my undergraduate, this is the only place I've worked for. I've only worked for BethanyKids. So I started out as an assistant to the founder. So I just finished school. I had not even graduated. And my mom actually works for BethanyKids, so she's the chaplain in BethanyKids.
I love that.
So very interesting. But the founder, Dr. Bransford, knew that someone had graduated, and he liked the school I was at. It's called Daystar University, and so he just asked me to come and be his assistant. And the first thing he asked me to do was do a financial study, because BethanyKids had just moved to Kijabi Hospital and formed that partnership. So he wanted to know what impact we were having financially on Kijabi. And I did that, and he seemed to like it. And so he offered me a job as his assistant. So we worked with him for 11 years, I think, 7 years, sorry. Yeah, we worked with him for 7 years. It was fun. It was a lot of fun. I learned a lot. And he gave me jobs in all different departments. So he gave me a time to learn a lot about BethanyKids. But I've enjoyed working with BethanyKids. I don't think I'll ever work for any other organization. So I don't see myself working for any other place except BethanyKids. So it's been what God wanted of me.
That's fantastic. I'm curious about the pediatric surgeons. Are they more kind of temporary, short-term missions, stints kind of thing, or are they long-term?
Yeah, so these are nationals who have been trained just in the building that David is sitting in right now. So they might come from Uganda or Ethiopia or as far away as Madagascar. They'll train with us for 3 or 5 years, and then when they return to their home country, they are permanent. So the vast majority of our surgeons are nationals to their home countries. They're not sort of Western missionaries coming in. The vast majority of our team are people who serve in their home countries. And that has really meant that I think even in a season of like a pandemic where international travel has been reduced, we haven't depended on someone like myself or someone in the West flying to perform a surgery. We haven't had to stop surgeries because of international travel. Everyone serves in their home country. And so that has really allowed us to, I think, thrive in the midst of this pandemic and continue to, last year, there's still over 2,600 surgeries that we performed at our various sites. And that's in the middle of a global pandemic. So continuing to do good work. And I think it's because of what you were pointing to, that in terms of who are the surgeons. Right now, David mentioned Dr. Bransford, and he was one of the people who started it. He was an American, and we have 2 Americans who serve as assistant surgeons to the head of our surgical program, who is a Kenyan from Mombasa. So we really take pride in ensuring that the people who are benefiting from the service really have stake in it, that they are leading, that they have the ability to make decisions about the local program. So for us, that has always been critical. And now our head of surgical program for BethanyKids is a former graduate of the program. And of the other 6 countries outside of Kenya, the other 6 countries are all led by former graduates as well.
Mm. And like you said earlier too, just knowing the language, knowing the culture, there so many barriers are not there.
That's right. Yeah. I often think, in kind of the old-fashioned churches that I grew up in, at the back of their church, you'd have like a bulletin board with like a missionary, like, hey, we're sponsoring so and so. And my hope and dream for the future is that as we continue to grow, that the trainees and the people who are serving in Bethany Kids, that their stories and their faces would be on the back of church walls and people would know them, because this is the kingdom of God. Whether you're American, Canadian, or Kenyan, we are one family, we are one kingdom. And so to me, instead of just saying, oh, someone from our church has flown across the world and become a missionary, we can say that this is a missionary we are relationally connected with. They're serving in their home country. We love them. We get them on Zoom or Skype. We want them to be part of our community, even though they're serving in their home country. They're not taking, long furloughs or any of that. They're really just local people serving, but we get the chance to partner with them in the gospel, which to me is just an absolute joy.
Well, tell us how Alabama believers can help Bethany Kids.
Well, there are many ways. First of all, we started out from the beginning. We're not a large charity, and we have a small committed base of donors who've been really incredible. And we're really in a phase where there's so many opportunities for us to grow. Hiring new physiotherapists in Sierra Leone, medical equipment in Madagascar. There's so many specific, exciting projects that we're wanting to undertake. And the only way we can do that is with funding. So the first thing, of course, is finding new funders and supporters who see this as their mission and the way that they want to contribute to the global church. And so beyond that, I would say active participants in this mission, people who really champion this cause, people who, as I said, are sharing photos and pictures and saying, these are our people, right? Whether we are the same complexion or the same culture, the same language, we are God's people. And I would love to see your community of believers really lift up these surgeons and these stories and these people as brothers and sisters in Christ and tell their stories here in North America.
All right, David, any final words?
I'll share the word, and it's a beautiful. I'm blessed to be part of Bethany Kids. So anyone who gets to know about the work that we do, I think, will be amazed. And it's just a pleasure to see how God works through just many different types of people from many different types of places, serving many different types of people from all across Africa. So it's I spread the word as much as you can.
All right, and give us a website. How can we find more information?
So yeah, BethanyKids.org is our main website, and we're also on Instagram, BethanyKids.ig.
Okay, all right. Well, Peter and David, thank you for joining us. Thank you for sharing about Bethany Kids.
Thank you
All
for
right.
having us.
And thank you all for listening. We'll be back next week.